James Wheeler, your information. Today's information.
Let me be absolutely clear about what just happened. The American empire just suffered one of its most humiliating setbacks in recent memory, and the mainstream media is doing everything in its power to hide this from you. President Trump was about to bomb Iran. The plans were in motion. Military jets were being positioned across the Middle East. Non-essential personnel were being evacuated from Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. The Iranian airspace was closed for nearly 5 hours in anticipation of incoming American strikes. Everything was set for what the administration was calling a swift and decisive kinetic operation, and then the order never came. Trump backed down, not because of some diplomatic breakthrough, not because of humanitarian concerns. He backed down because Iran established real, credible deterrence against the United States military. A nation under illegal sanctions for 45 years just stared down the most powerful military machine in human history. And the empire blinked first. What I'm about to reveal is what CNN, BBC, the New York Times, and the Washington Post will never explain honestly. My sources have been tracking this situation closely, and what we've uncovered exposes the true nature of American imperial decline. This isn't just about Iran. This is about the fundamental shift in global power happening right now, right before our eyes. The unipolar moment that began when the Soviet Union collapsed is ending, and we are witnessing that ending in real time. The mainstream media wants you to believe this was a strategic pause, thoughtful deliberation, Trump being measured and presidential. That's the cover story they're selling. The truth is far more devastating to the narrative of American military supremacy. Pay close attention, because this is the information they desperately don't want you to have. I've been covering American foreign policy and regime change operations for many years now. What's happening with Iran right now confirms everything I've been warning about regarding the limits of imperial power. The empire is overextended. Its military is exhausted. Its allies are vulnerable. And nations willing to resist are discovering they can actually deter American aggression. This changes everything about the world we're going to live in. To understand what's really happening, you need to know the history that the mainstream media conveniently omits from every single report. The United States has been waging economic warfare against Iran since the 1979 revolution. That's over 45 years of illegal sanctions, sabotage, assassinations, and constant threats of military intervention. The empire has never accepted that the Iranian people chose their own path, and they've been trying to destroy that choice ever since. In 2015, after years of difficult negotiations, the Obama administration signed the Iran nuclear deal, known as the JCPOA. This wasn't just a bilateral agreement between two countries. It was written into international law through UN Security Council Resolution 2231. It involved the 5 permanent members of the Security Council, plus Germany, plus the European Union. It was binding international law. And in 2018, Trump unilaterally and illegally tore it up because he could. Because the empire believes international law only applies to other countries, never to itself. Since then, the administration has played this cynical game of claiming they want new negotiations, while simultaneously giving Israel the green light to bomb Iranian territory. Think about the staggering arrogance of that position. We'll negotiate with you while we're bombing you. What kind of negotiation happens when one side is actively attacking the other? This isn't diplomacy. This is coercion wearing the mask of diplomacy. This is imperial domination pretending to be international relations. Last June, in 2025, Israel and the United States carried out coordinated strikes on Iran. They destroyed approximately 1,000 ballistic missiles and 250 mobile launchers. They severely damaged nuclear facilities. The mainstream media celebrated this as a victory for security and democracy. What they didn't emphasize nearly enough is what happened next. Because what happened next exposes the fundamental weakness of the empire's position. Iran retaliated. They launched ballistic missiles at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, the largest American military installation in the entire Middle East. They hit targets inside Israeli territory. Multiple missiles penetrated Israeli air defenses. The vaunted Iron Dome, the Arrow system, David's Sling, all those missile defense systems we've been told are impenetrable. They were penetrated repeatedly. Israeli cities were struck. Israeli civilians died. That's why Israel agreed to a ceasefire after only 12 days. Not because they wanted peace, not because of humanitarian concerns, because they were getting hit. and they couldn't stop it. Here's the number. The propaganda machine doesn't want you to focus on. Israel spent between $1.48 and $1.58 billion on missile interceptors during just 12 days of conflict. $1.5 billion in 12 days just on interceptors. And despite that staggering expenditure, Iranian missiles still got through. The economics of this should terrify the empire's strategic planners. Iran can build missiles far cheaper than Israel can build interceptors. Every exchange favors Iran economically. This is the fundamental math of deterrence, and it's a math that doesn't work in America's favor. The expectation in Washington and Tel Aviv after the June War was that Iran would need years to rebuild its missile capability. American intelligence assessments claimed Iran's arsenal had been significantly degraded. The assumption underlying Trump's war planning was that any follow-up attack would face minimal retaliation. That assumption was catastrophically wrong. According to the Institute for the Study of War, Iran has restored its heavy ballistic missile stockpile to approximately 2,000 units. Let that number sink in for a moment. 2,000 missiles. That's more than they had before the June attacks destroyed 1,000. They rebuilt, and then they exceeded their previous capability, all in a matter of months. While the empire was celebrating its victory, Iran was quietly preparing to make the next confrontation even more costly. How did they accomplish this seemingly impossible feat? The so-called missile cities. These are massive underground facilities that Iran has been constructing for years, carved deep into mountain ranges where American bunker busters cannot reach them. These facilities kept operating throughout the war and after. Iran acquired new planetary mixers for solid propellant production. They maintained their entire missile manufacturing capability, even under the most intense pressure the empire could apply. While American analysts were briefing Trump that Iran was weak and vulnerable, while the mainstream media was celebrating the destruction of Iranian capabilities, Iran was quietly rebuilding stronger than before. Either this represents the most colossal intelligence failure in recent American history, or they knew and lied anyway. I'll let you decide which possibility is more disturbing. Now let me take you inside the confrontation that just played out, because this is where the humiliation becomes absolutely undeniable. Trump was ready to bomb. He believed his own propaganda about swift and decisive military action. The doctrine his advisors were promoting was simple. Bomb hard, bomb fast, get what you want. For the neocons around him, that has always meant regime change in Tehran. They thought they could topple the Iranian government in days, just like they thought they could do in Iraq, just like they thought they could do in Libya, just like they thought they could do in Syria. On January 9th, Vice President J.D. Vance chaired the first high-level meeting at the White House to discuss military options against Iran in detail. This wasn't theoretical planning. This was operational preparation. The decision had essentially been made. Only the timing remained uncertain. On January 14th, U.S. Central Command initiated what they called a posture change at Al Udeid Air Base. Non-essential personnel were ordered to evacuate immediately. This wasn't a drill. This wasn't a routine adjustment. This was preparation for imminent war. They were clearing the base to minimize American casualties when Iranian missiles inevitably came in response to American strikes. The State Department simultaneously issued warnings to all Americans abroad to exercise increased caution. Embassy personnel were being evacuated from Iraq and Lebanon. Military families were being relocated. The Fifth Fleet base in Bahrain was being prepared. Everything was shifting to wartime posture across the entire region. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi was in back-channel communication with Steve Witkoff, Trump's envoy. The Iranians knew an attack was coming. They closed their airspace for nearly 5 hours. Airlines were rerouted away from Iranian territory. Iran was bracing for American bombs. Everything was in position for what was supposed to be a devastating strike that would finally bring Iran to its knees. And then something remarkable happened. Something that exposed the reality behind all the imperial bluster. Trump backed down. The fighter jets returned to their bases. The bombing campaign never materialized. The mainstream media scrambled to spin this as strategic wisdom, as measured decision-making, as Trump being thoughtful. That's not what happened at all. Netanyahu asked Trump to delay the attack. I need you to understand the staggering significance of this revelation. Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, who has been demanding war with Iran for literally decades, the man who gave that infamous speech to Congress, with a cartoon bomb diagram, the leader of America's most aggressive ally in the Middle East, personally called Trump and begged him to postpone the bombing campaign. The reason is absolutely devastating to the narrative of American and Israeli military supremacy. Netanyahu admitted to Trump that Israel does not have enough Arrow missile interceptors to defend itself against the Iranian retaliation that would inevitably follow American strikes. The Israeli Defense Forces had not replenished their stockpile from the June 2025 war. They had burned through their interceptors and hadn't replaced them. Think about what this admission means. The Iron Dome that they've been selling to the world as the most advanced defensive system ever created, the system that supposedly makes Israel invulnerable to missile attack, it's not enough. It failed repeatedly during the 12-day war. Israeli cities were hit. Israelis died. And Netanyahu knows that if Trump bombs Iran now, it will happen again, and Israel cannot stop it. The most militarily advanced proxy of the American empire in the Middle East is privately admitting that it cannot defend itself against a country that has been under crippling sanctions for 45 years. The narrative of Israeli invincibility that underlies so much American Middle East policy? It's a carefully constructed lie, and Netanyahu just admitted it to Trump in a private phone call that leaked almost immediately to the media. Arabia Saudita, Qatar, Oman, and Egypt also pressured Trump not to attack. 4 Arab countries that are supposedly American allies worked to prevent American military action. Think about what that means for American influence in the region. Your own allies are telling you not to start a war because they know the consequences will be disastrous for everyone. There's another dimension to this story that exposes even more about the shifting balance of power. You've heard about the protests in Iran, the internet blackouts, the chaos that the mainstream media has been celebrating as a spontaneous democratic uprising against a brutal regime. What they haven't explained is the technological warfare happening behind the scenes. Former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo posted on social media during the protests. His message said, and I quote, "Happy New Year to every Iranian in the streets. Also to every Mossad agent walking beside them." Let that sink in. A former senior American official publicly acknowledged that Mossad agents were embedded within the Iranian protests. He wasn't supposed to say that part out loud. The mask slipped. Israeli Channel 13 reported that Mossad had transitioned from passive observation to active technical facilitation of the protests. Israeli cyber units allegedly initiated reflector attacks and targeted DDoS operations against Iranian jamming centers, designed to, quote, blind the blinder by overwhelming the servers and power grids that fuel the regime's electronic warfare apparatus. This wasn't a spontaneous uprising of freedom-loving people. This was a color revolution operation run by intelligence agencies. The empire's tool of choice for organizing these color revolutions is Starlink, Elon Musk's satellite internet service. Approximately 40,000 Starlink terminals were reportedly smuggled into Iran for the protesters. SpaceX waived subscription fees for Iranian users during the protests. Trump said publicly he would talk to Musk about restoring internet access in Iran. The connection between Musk and American regime change operations is undeniable at this point. Starlink was given to coup plotters in Venezuela. Maria Corina Machado publicly thanked Elon Musk for providing hundreds of Starlink devices to opposition leaders during an interview with Donald Trump Jr. on his Rumble show. In that same interview, Machado promised to privatize all Venezuelan oil and sell it to American companies. Starlink has been a crucial military asset for Ukraine's proxy war against Russia. And now, Starlink was being deployed as a weapon for regime change in Iran. It's not an internet service. It's a tool of imperial domination. Iran successfully jammed it. Using Russian electronic warfare technology, the Iranian government systematically crippled Starlink service across the country. The Krasuka 4, a mobile Russian system designed to jam low Earth orbit satellites at distances up to 300 kilometers. The Murmansk BN, an advanced system Russia transferred to Iran in 2024, capable of disrupting military communications up to 5,000 kilometers away. The Tirada 2s for uplink jamming, which blasts high-power signals at satellites. Iran's own Cobra 8 system, unveiled in 2023, capable of intercepting, analyzing, and jamming enemy communications. This combination of Russian technology transfer and indigenous Iranian capability created electronic warfare capacity that nobody in Washington expected. Starlink performance was reduced by up to 80% in parts of Iran. Packet loss rates of 90% made connections completely unusable, The supposedly unjammable satellite internet was jammed. Musk's magic bullet was neutralized. More importantly, by locating the Starlink terminals, Iranian security forces were able to identify foreign intelligence assets on the ground. They arrested operatives and broadcast televised confessions, detailing how they were recruited through social media by Mossad handlers. Years of CIA and Mossad preparation for this color revolution were neutralized in days. The regime change operation collapsed. Even while Trump threatened to bomb, even while American warships positioned for attack, Iranian naval vessels participated in joint military exercises with China, Russia, and other BRICS nations off the coast of South Africa. The exercises were called Will for Peace 2026, led by China, starting January 10th. Right in the middle of this crisis, with American bombs supposedly about to fall, South Africa, under intense American pressure, asked Iran to withdraw from the exercises at the last minute to avoid antagonizing Washington further. Iran participated anyway. That's not the behavior of a weakened, isolated nation. That's confidence. That's a message to Washington that Iran has powerful friends, that attacking Iran means confronting an alliance spanning continents, that the empire cannot isolate Iran no matter how hard it tries. Now here's what the empire discovered when it actually tried to execute its war plans. Imperial overstretch is real. On January 5th, 2026, not a single one of America's 11 nuclear-powered aircraft carriers was operating in the Middle East. Zero. None. The USS Gerald R. Ford, the most advanced carrier in the fleet, was in the Caribbean for Operation Southern Spear against Venezuela. The USS Abraham Lincoln was in the Indo-Pacific patrolling against China. The empire had spread itself across too many theaters simultaneously. Only 3 destroyers with Tomahawk cruise missiles were available in the region. The Patriot Air Defense Unit had returned to South Korea in October for equipment upgrades. The military infrastructure for a sustained bombing campaign simply wasn't in place. The empire had spread itself too thin across too many simultaneous confrontations. Venezuela, the Pacific, Europe, and when the crisis came in Iran, they didn't have enough forces positioned to execute the war they wanted. Admiral Darrell Caudle, the chief of naval operations, publicly pushed back against sending more carriers to the Middle East. He cited concerns about sailors deployed too long, about maintenance contracts with shipyards, about the strain on personnel and equipment. People want some type of certainty that they're going to do a 7-month deployment, he said. When it goes past that, it disrupts lives. When the admiral in charge of the entire Navy is publicly resisting presidential war orders, citing exhaustion and logistics, that tells you something profound about the state of American military power. The Washington Post was forced to acknowledge that Trump confronted the limits of U.S. military power. That's the headline from the newspaper of record of the American establishment. Limits of American military power. When was the last time you saw that admission in mainstream media? The Middle East Institute analysis was even more blunt. Military options more limited than June 2025. Benefits less predictable. Strategic risks heightened. This is the reality of imperial decline that the propaganda machine works so hard to conceal. The empire still possesses enormous destructive capability. It can still cause immense suffering around the world, but it can no longer simply bomb any country, anywhere without consequence. When a global South nation can rebuild 2,000 missiles in months, when it can jam the empire's communication tools, when its main regional target admits it cannot defend itself against retaliation, the entire calculus of power projection changes. Deterrence becomes real. The implications for the future are enormous and world historical. Trump hasn't given up on attacking Iran. This was a postponement, not a cancellation. The USS Abraham Lincoln is being redirected from the Pacific to the Arabian Sea. More fighters, more tankers, more air defense systems are being deployed. Netanyahu has discussed round 2 strikes with Trump. Israeli media reports that an attack remains inevitable, merely a question of timing rather than possibility. The empire will try again, but every time they fail, credibility erodes further. Every time a global South country successfully resists, others around the world take note. Libya disarmed at Western request and was destroyed. Gaddafi trusted Western promises and paid with his life and his country. Iraq had no weapons of mass destruction and was invaded anyway. Syria nearly fell, but Russian intervention saved it. Iran kept its capabilities and now can deter the empire. The lesson is unmistakable for every country watching. Never disarm, never trust imperial promises. Build alliances with others who resist. Develop indigenous capabilities that cannot be easily destroyed. Because when the empire eventually comes for you, and it comes for everyone who refuses to submit, your only protection is the ability to make them pay a price they're unwilling to pay. Iran just demonstrated that such protection is achievable. The multipolar world isn't rhetoric at diplomatic summits. It's real technology transfer from Russia that jams American satellites. It's real military exercises coordinating China, Russia, and Iran. It's real economic alternatives that allow countries to trade despite American sanctions. It's real because it produces real deterrence that actually stops imperial aggression. China continues buying Iranian oil despite sanctions. Russia provides electronic warfare systems and missile technology. BRICS naval exercises demonstrate alliance solidarity under pressure. Venezuela resists even after the empire kidnapped its president. Cuba has endured 65 years of brutal blockade. Nicaragua persists despite decades of intervention. The architecture of resistance is being built across the global south, and it's working. This is precisely why independent media matters now more than ever. The mainstream propaganda machine will never tell you this story honestly. They'll focus obsessively on Iranian protesters without ever mentioning who organized and funded them. They'll celebrate American military power without acknowledging its failures and limitations. They'll call it democracy promotion when the empire tries to overthrow elected governments. They'll call it terrorism when those governments defend themselves. You need to share this information with everyone you know. You need to support independent journalists willing to challenge the official narrative. You need to question every single story that comes from the empire's propaganda apparatus. The truth is powerful, which is exactly why they work so desperately to suppress it. Iran just humiliated the American empire. Not through terrorism, not through unprovoked aggression, through deterrence, by being strong enough that the empire had to back down. The bully backed down. That's the story they don't want you to understand. That's the precedent they're terrified will spread to every other country resisting American hegemony. The world is changing. American hegemony is declining. The multipolar order is emerging. Every day brings new evidence that the unipolar moment is ending. This isn't speculation about some distant theoretical future. It's happening now. We're watching history unfold in real time. Stay informed. Question everything the mainstream media tells you. Support those who speak truth to power. Share this information widely. The story isn't over. In many ways, it's just beginning. What happens next will shape the world for generations to come. And the only way to navigate what's coming is to understand the truth about what's actually happening, not the propaganda version they're feeding you. The truth is the most powerful weapon we have against the empire of lies. And that's exactly why they work so hard to keep it from us. I'll keep bringing you the information they don't want you to have. Keep watching. Keep questioning. Keep resisting their narrative. The empire's grip is slipping, and every person who wakes up to reality brings us closer to a world where nations can actually determine their own destinies without imperial interference.